Great. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Charlotte Ashton and I'm an employment solicitor with Farleys Solicitors. We're just going to give a couple of minutes just to make sure that everyone who wants to attend can log in and attend. I'm joined by Nicola and Sarah from Delve OD, who will introduce themselves in a moment when we've got a few more attendees. And what we're going to talk to you about today is we're going to run through a little bit about the legalities of furlough and the kind of issues that will be coming up in the future. But we're really going to look at it from the human side. Obviously, COVID-19, this crisis, lockdown, has affected everybody in many different ways. And what we want to do is make sure that we're really focusing on how we can help your employees and help you manage your employees and make sure that they're as engaged and happy as possible as we develop the way we work in future. So like I say, we're just at 1 o'clock, just a little bit past 1, so just give a little bit more time for anyone to join us. It's going to be an interactive session, so we do have polls through the session, and we're happy for you to chat as we're going through. Feel free to have a conversation and chat amongst yourselves and share ideas, because we really want this to be a webinar where we're not just talking at you, but we're listening to you as well. Great, okay. So we're going to share some slides, and as we go through, I'll start and just do the little bit about the legal bit, and then Nicola and Sarah will take over from the more human aspect of it. Okay.
Can you see the right slides there?
Yep, these look like the right slides to me. So this is the human impact of furlough. Like I say, we're going to talk a little bit about furlough, a little bit about the changes, but really looking at the impact of it on people and how we can help people through this. So furlough obviously was introduced towards the end of March. It was a government scheme. Its full sort of correct title is the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, obviously with the aim of keeping as many people in employment whilst we go through the crisis, we go through social distancing and workplaces being shut down. We've got some key dates coming up with furlough changes. First of all, from the 1st of July, we have the ability to do flexible furlough. So that's where you can bring people back in off furlough part-time, and you can still claim through the scheme for the days when they normally would have worked, but you don't necessarily need them. There's then going to be a tapering of the government support. So a lot of employers will need to be doing some calculations about this. This is where from the 1st of August, 1st of September, and then 1st of October, there will be a different level of support. So at the moment, the government covers 80% of wages. That will change from the 1st of August, 1st of September, and from 1st of October. And finally, the scheme itself will end completely at the end of October. It will be interesting to see if any of that changes, because obviously we are currently, I believe our level's been lowered today. We're at a lower coronavirus level or something. So it might be that if anything changes in future and that goes back up again, things could change. But for now, employers need to use those dates to work out how they're going to manage staff going forwards and how they're going to manage the cost to the business. And that does mean facing difficult choices to ensure the long-term survival of the business. Many employers have had to think about, can we actually furlough people, or do we need to make them redundant now? Employers are having to think about, can we continue to keep people on the furlough scheme, or are we just putting off the inevitable, which means redundancies? Employers might have to consider, does the way we work require us to change terms and conditions with employees and how things work in practice? So there's going to be a lot of difficult considerations, and it would always be helpful to get some advice, bounce your ideas off people, and really plan through it so that you can understand how your business has got the best chance of survival over the coming months. So next slide, please, Nicola. Thank you. So On the other side of things, there's a potential sort of future legal considerations, not just around the furlough scheme and the changes there and about the potential for redundancies, but also about employees who've now had a different way of working and actually might quite like it, might want to keep this work-life balance that they've grown used to. So I would expect employers seeing an increase in flexible working requests. That might be something where they've not necessarily had that many before, or it might have been limited to those employees who've been on maternity leave or other parental leave. But any employee with 26 weeks service could make a flexible working request. So as and when you're bringing people back to the office, you may find they then turn around and say, actually, I want to carry on working from home and I want to work the hours that I have been working. Unfortunately, schools look like they're not opening to a larger number of pupils until September, and there's talk about even from September onwards there being difficulty with having all pupils back to school. So there's going to be a continued conflict between childcare and work. So that's something that employers are going to have to carefully manage. And there are a number of different sort of leave arrangements that can come into play there. So you can have emergency leave for dependents, you can have parental leave, you could have, again, flexible working requests helping that. Moving on to the other more general ones, if you don't have enough work but you want to be more flexible in how you operate your business, you might actually be looking to change the contracts of the people who are working for you. You need agreement for that, and you would need to be consulting with employees for that. So that means that you could be in a situation where you're having to do collective consultation and trying to get employees to agree a whole new set of terms and conditions so that your business can go on and survive. And another bullet point, a big one that's come up for me is many employers asking, how do we manage the holidays? We've had staff on furlough accruing holidays, and our holiday year ends in December, and these people might not come back until September, October. So you might want to think about, are we going to make employees take holidays? Are we going to say they have to use them by a certain date? Are we going to allow employees to roll over a certain amount of holidays? There's a government guidance which has said that employees should be allowed to roll over their holidays if they've been prevented from taking them because of coronavirus. And also you've got the issue about if people are travelling abroad and then coming back and ending up in quarantine, how do you manage that? Do you do it through a mix of holidays and a mix of unpaid leave? So furlough aside, you've then still got this big melting pot of a huge amount of other issues that are going to crop up. And you might want to obviously plan ahead, make some sort of temporary policies so that you know how you're going to deal with these as and when they arise. And then finally, longer term trouble brewing. And this is where Nicola and Sarah are hopefully really going to help you. One of the big issues that I can see happening in future is the issue with employee resentment or disengagement, because either they've been on furlough for a long time or they've been the one working and seeing colleagues on furlough. When the furlough scheme was first announced, many employers kind of rushed into it, and there were a few issues about actually how much you get paid and whether the employer should top up to 100%. And if employers haven't properly dealt with that contractually, you could have long-term pay issues whereby someone could be claiming for that extra 20% if they've not agreed with you to reduce their pay. You also have the issue of managing employees in different situations. You may have employees who before furlough were poorly performing and you wanted to deal with them. And after furlough, you need to bring them back and you need to work out how you're going to go about managing those employees. Or you might even find that you're trying to manage employees remotely and you're finding it difficult. You've also got the issue of destabilising the staff as the furlough support reduces and as you start looking at redundancies. So from a legal point of view, we can tell you, here's the safe way to go about it, and here's sort of a plan that you can follow, and we can give you template letters. But what you also really need to think about is how can we implement the correct legal plan, but making sure that our employees feel valued and feel that this isn't just a short, sharp shock for them. This is something where we're trying to save the majority of the business. As always, we can talk you through alternative options. So redundancy doesn't have to be the only option. We can talk about whether it's possible to go through changes to terms and conditions, for example, or whether throughout the wider business, there's scope for some kind of restructure that helps keep as many jobs as possible. So like I say, as and when people come back to work, there is going to be that sort of potential for disenfranchised employees, trouble to be brewing, and that is normally what leads to difficult situations and eventual employment tribunals. So I'm going to pass over to Nicola and Sarah, who will take you through some information and some helpful guidance about how to manage the employees.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah and this is Nick, and we're the Delvers, and you've got our Twitter handle up there as well as the Farleys Law one, so if you want to do any tweeting or get in touch with us via Twitter, you can do. We're really pleased to be working with Farleys to deliver this session. We're a leadership, organisational development and talent company, and we've been in business for about 5 years now. And our purpose and our vision is to think about how we really enable work communities to be places where people can thrive. So it's really important to us that we're able to do that. And as a small organisation ourselves, we've got 2 members of staff that are currently furloughed as well. So this is all really relevant for us. And we've been working with a lot of different organisations who are in similar positions. So lots of experiences that we can share with you really. We'll be making a couple of polls that we'll be doing as well as we go throughout. So there'll be opportunity for you to contribute to the polls. There's also, if you want to put anything on the chat or any questions that you might have, you can do that as well. And we'll have some space at the end to have a discussion and answer any questions. So really the first thing we wanted to share with you is thinking about what is important around that human factor when it comes to furlough. And the COVID-19 crisis obviously taken us all a lot by surprise, and our first priority will always be people's health and doing everything that we can to stop the spread of the virus and stay healthy. And we also know that major events like this can have a real psychological impact on us. And it's no longer business as usual with 9.1 million jobs furloughed at the moment. So what's that human impact on people and our businesses, and how can we really reset our culture to enable people to thrive? So we'll share some tools and techniques with you that hopefully you'll be really practical ways of enabling people to come back from furlough and how you support people. And also thinking about what concerns people might have as well. So, as Charlotte said, people have been working in a completely different way. There's going to be lots of concerns around, when I do come back, what's it going to be like? What are some of the safety measures that are going to be in place? How do I deal with public transport? Lots of different things that people might have concerns about. And also, how are you supporting those people who haven't been furloughed? So we know that, a lot of people have different views around furlough, and those that have stayed behind might feel a little bit resentful. So what does that look like, and how do we support those people as well? So lots of organisations have been absolutely brilliant at staying in touch with staff, those that have been working from home and those that have been furloughed as well. And we'll share some of those positive experiences and ideas with you, as well as a couple of negative examples as well. But the important thing really to remember is that putting the guidelines aside, communicating with people and reminding people that they are important, and as employers and managers, we genuinely care about their well-being is the key thing really.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start by looking at different maps of reality and how this can impact on how people are feeling about coming back. You can see from this picture, this is the non-furloughed view of everybody furloughed right now, especially when we have the nice weather and before all the rain. So this, lots of different perspectives going on. And in reality, a lot of people who are furloughed, certainly who we've worked with, are really starting to have a crisis in confidence and questioning, was I ever that useful? Why am I not needed? Will I have a job to go back to? And if I have got a job to go back to, what will that look like? Things have changed so much. And on the other side, we've got people who are carrying on doing the work while people are furloughed, but obviously their reality is sometimes a little bit like this, which has been a real learning curve for all of us to try and adapt to working at home with pets, children, and all sorts of things going on. It's no wonder then by October, November, we're probably all going to look like this after all the changes that we've gone through. And, you know, this is why we've really got to be quite concerned about burnout for people who are still in work and really thinking about the well-being of those people who are yet to return. So what we'd like to do is just do our first poll, if that's okay. So I'm hoping Charlotte is going to pull something up on the screen very shortly, and you should be able to vote on your current situation for your business.
Okay, I've launched the poll, so hopefully that should be working for everybody.
If anybody needs to question, if you can't see anything or you need any help, just use the chat function to let us know.
Okay, so has everyone had a chance to vote?
I think we've got 11 out of 12 out of 13 people have voted.
Great,
Brilliant.
shall we
A few more
close it and share the results?
Okay, so I'll just press end poll now. There we go. Can everyone see the results, or do I need?
I think you need to share them.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah,
there we go.
Perfect.
Oh, great. So huge number in the same position there, isn't there? Some trading on a limited basis, some staff furloughed, some working from home or in company premises. So yeah, absolutely.
And I think some of the ideas that we share, you know, we are talking about people coming back from furlough, but some of it will apply to those people working from home as well. So those of you that are in that position, you should be able to take some of that learning for those people as well.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you everyone for taking part in that. So if we just close the poll, I'm assuming you can all see the slides again. So what I'd like to do is just think about, most of you have been on some sort of leadership program in the past where you might have come across the change curve, which kind of shows you the different stages that people experience as they're going through any kind of change. And just to share this with you in regards to furlough and how feelings might impact, it's as good as a basis to know exactly what's going on. So starting off, if you think back to beginning of March when all of this first kicked off, you know, there's a little bit of anticipation. This can be both positive and negative. So for people that were furloughed, it could have been the real positive side of having an extended break, chance to do all the jobs that you haven't done yet, spend more time with the children. It's going to be great. The sun's going to be out. And for some people, it could have been the absolute opposite, really worried about how they were going to cope at home without work in their lives. Not everybody has that comfortable home life. So there could have been a lot of anxiety and fear about how this change will have affected them. So lots of mixed feelings going on. And I think most of us were in denial in those first few weeks. I know when Sarah and I packed up our office on a day's notice, we only packed enough things for the next couple of weeks, not really realising the length of time that we'd actually not be allowed back in the office. But I think a lot of people just thought, well, it's only for a short time, I'll have to be back to normal. And lots of people were talking about, before we started talking about the new normal, people were talking about going back to business as usual very shortly, but that hasn't happened for us. And as time goes on, we've heard many stories from our clients and the employees that work with them. And you can see how the change curve takes us down this sort of path and you start to feel that threat and that fear. So from the photograph earlier, people really doubting their value, their worth, how come I've been furloughed? How come Bob's suddenly so important? And Bob's doing the work of 5 people back in the office or from home. And it's left people with a lot of uncertainty and fear about whether they're going to ever fit back into that organisation again. Now, if you keep going down if you carry on the pattern of the change curve, what you end up with is that real low mood and a real disconnection from the organisation, where they're not sure about their future. Maybe even some of them will be thinking, well, okay, I'll start looking for another job. I'm going to be off. I'll just see what happens after furlough, but I know I'm not appreciated here, so I'm going to look elsewhere. And what we've got to really make sure that we're doing is, those, if we are actually having meaningful check-ins, that curve doesn't have to dip so low. You don't need to get to the stage where there's that low mood and that disconnection. So your main priority throughout all of this is, with meaningful check-ins, kind of make sure people feel very, very connected to the organisation. You won't have all the answers, you won't have all the plans in place, but it's about checking in on people's well-being and involve them in decisions, involve them in what the future might look like, help them to visualise what that might look like as they move forward, and get them to accept and acknowledge that it will be different when they return to work, but we're all going to support each other, and it's going to be messy and uncomfortable, but we're all going to work together to actually achieve this. And what you end up with eventually is that there's that integration and renewed sense of purpose when everybody comes back. And one of the things we're going to be talking about a little bit later is, how do you reset that culture so you start as you mean to go on?
So just thinking about how we might bring people back, the CIPD have done quite a lot of research around and shared lots of resources. For anybody's a CIPD member, there's quite a few useful guidelines on there it's worth taking a look at. But just to summarise some of the things that's important to think about when you're bringing people back, because there's a real intense pressure, particularly for small businesses, to get up and running, or risk going under, but it can't be at the expense of people staying safe. And the questions really to ask: is it essential for people to come back into the workplace? If they can't work from home, is their work deemed essential? Can you continue to use the job retention scheme for a bit longer? Obviously, Charlotte's talked about how it's going to reduce over time, so you'll need to think about that financial impact. But that might give you the time that you need to put the right safety measures and clear guidance in place, and the right consultation. And if people are working from home, have they got the right resources to enable them to do that effectively? So we've got a range of people might have a great office setup at home, other people might be working on the sofa at the kitchen table, and is that really going to be beneficial to their health long term? What resources do they need? Is there something around the furniture? Is there something around making sure they've got the right IT set up? You also need to think about, is it safe? So is it sufficiently safe for people to return, and have you put the right measures in place? So take your time with gradual returns, test out your risk assessment. We've had to recently do a risk assessment for us returning to our office, which I'm sure you're all working on. And think about, is it mutually agreed? So are you having the right conversations with people? It's vital that there's that clear dialogue so that concerns can be discussed and raised individually. So people might have concerns about how they're going to get to work, people might have concerns, as Charlotte said, potentially schools aren't going to be going back, and even if they do in September, it's probably still going to be part-time. So people will still have concerns about childcare. And there'll need to be a bit of flexibility on both sides. So if people do have to be back in the workplace, can you do things like stagger start times? Communicating the practical measures is also really important. So being able to make sure that people know what to expect when they come back in, and they're clear about what rules and procedures will be in place, whether they're working at home or whether they're back in the workplace. Thinking about meetings as well, how we manage meetings and interviews and other interactions, things like, people being in canteens or shared kitchen areas. Even if staff have carried on working, we seem to be very much replacing face-to-face meetings with video meetings, and people will need some time to readjust to working in that shared environment with colleagues again. And our meetings, the answer, a lot of the time you can think about all the times you spent in back-to-back meetings, were they actually adding value? And are we just sort of replacing them? And people are starting to get Zoom fatigue now, and it's a completely different feeling. And are they actually needed? Is there an opportunity to recreate something different? Where are meetings working? How else can we engage with people? And reorientating people as well. So it's important to have a process for bringing people back, encouraging and supporting managers to have one-to-one return meetings with everybody, with a key focus on health, safety and well-being. And especially important for those who have been furloughed, because there's nothing worse than sort of coming back and everything's changed, company procedures and policies have changed, the ways of working have changed. So it's really important to have those conversations when we're thinking about how we're bringing people back. And we've just got a couple of examples here really of what not to do. So these are real life examples. So the first one is a member of staff who worked for an organisation, who'd been on furlough from the start, and he's still on furlough now, and had no communication at all in the time that he's been on furlough, other than every 3 weeks the HR manager would send a general email out just saying the furlough's continuing for another 3 weeks, no sort of check-in. And then suddenly they went on, they sent out this survey, and it had a number of questions, and there was one on how do you feel about Zoom chats and quizzes. So really, when you've had no correspondence at all from that company, and then suddenly you're asked if you want to partake in a Zoom quiz, you're going to be thinking, well, no, you're not even telling me what's going on in terms of my job. Why would I want to start doing a Zoom quiz? So it's thinking about, is that the right engagement? And, you know, fair enough, if you've got that culture where quizzes are okay, that's great to do that. But in this case, it just wasn't working. And then the second photo we've got there is, again, this is a real life photo. So a member of staff had been on furlough and then working from home. And they came back into the workplace, went to the desk, and were met with this big sign saying that this desk is strictly not to be used, big red sign. There was no communication. They had no idea that they were going to come back into that. There was no manager around to ask. So, you know, what do you do? Do you go home? Do you sit on the floor? So it's really important. You can imagine how those people are feeling. They're not feeling valued. And we can't emphasise enough, as you know, about having those honest one-to-one conversations with people before they return. So we'd just like to do another poll now, if that's okay, just to find out what sort of measures you've thought about putting in place. So Charlotte, are we okay to launch that second poll around the measures?
Yeah, just launching poll number 2 now.
Thank you. So I think you should be able to pick more than one, hopefully, on this one. And there might be other things that aren't detailed on there. So if there's anything else that you're doing, it'd be great to share that in the chat. If you've got any other great measures that you're putting in place, just so that other people can get an idea as well. So how are we doing? Has everybody had a chance to vote?
We're getting up there. I think a few more seconds, few more chances. Right, okay, shall I end the poll and
thank you.
Share the results? There we go.
Okay, brilliant. So thanks everybody for joining in with that. So we've got 91% of people saying that they're going to have more people working from home, which is really interesting. And it's almost, whilst it's been a horrible time, it's almost offered people that opportunity to think about how we can do more flexible working. We've just got somebody on the chat there that's mentioned their layout provides a possible one-way system around the building. So that's, you know, if there's an opportunity to do that as well, that's fantastic. Staggered shifts, again, is quite important, that altered layouts and flexible working. Fewer and shorter meetings, can't underestimate how good that that will be for people as well. The reorientation program, I've only got a couple of people thinking about that, but it's definitely something worth thinking about, because if you've been off for a long time, those of you that might have been on a career break, or if you've been on maternity leave, you'll know how daunting it can be coming back into the workplace. So thinking about that reorientation program will be really important, and thinking about what you're putting in place for people's well-being and what that one-to-one process will look like. So thank you very much for that.
As well, to add to that, really, you've got more people working from home. Your leadership, your managers are going to really need some support to how they connect with teams from home as well, because it's a very different beast, as we all know. Certainly some of the leaders we come across who like to sort of be very command and control, like people in front of them so they can tell them what to do. Well, those days have gone, and the flexible working makes some managers feel very uncomfortable. So it's really not forgetting that they will need some extra support so that they're able to connect with people from home effectively and ensure everybody's happy, really. So it's just something else to point out. But thank you for that. So we'll close that now. What we'll do is we'll just now go into, how do we check in then in the meantime? Because obviously that example that Sarah just shared, around 10 weeks later suddenly decided to do a Zoom quiz, is probably, it smacks of being on a session like this, really, doesn't it? Like, oh, I need to do something. So I think the message here is, don't do anything in panic now, because if you haven't been doing things already. It's just about remembering the human in all of us, and just giving it a second thought, think what might that person be going through. And quite often, you know, we ask, how are you? And people respond, I'm fine. And we all know that potentially that isn't a very effective question or answer. And something we're going to have to really consider, especially when we're not seeing people's face to face, and we're not meeting over the kettle or the water cooler. Just asking how are you isn't going to be enough, and people are going to really have to check in a much more meaningful way. Communication with staff is absolutely key, and it sounds like an old cliche, but we can't emphasize it enough. Just keep people informed of what your business is doing, whether it's good news or bad news. You know, some of us as business leaders or as business managers still don't know what the world's going to look like in September, but just be really authentic and transparent with your teams, because we all know it's that uncertainty that costs us or causes us the most stress, more than the facts. So just be really open and transparent, and make sure they know they're valued by their employer. And include people, try and talk through possible scenarios of what might the role look like. You're not committing to anything, you're just having an open and transparent conversation about what the future world of work might look like, and explore that with the people to keep them involved. Always remember to ask them about them. So your updates shouldn't really just be about what the business is doing, where you get your income from and all of that. It should be partly that, and also partly about how are you doing, how are you coping from home, what your feelings, what your hopes are, what your fears are, and be really open to that. I mean, some people that have been furloughed from the start might have embraced it at the beginning, but the novelty might be starting to wear off. So it's just important to remember that as we go through. I mean, one of the great things that we've heard from some of our clients is that they've really tried to embrace the training. So people haven't had time for training in the past, and it's an opportunity to learn something new. It doesn't have to be work related. And make sure you're showing an interest in any projects they're working on. There's a really useful tool some of you may have come across before. It's called StrengthsFinder 2.0 by Tom Rath, and it's readily available on Amazon. And it's a book, and there's an online code at the back where people can go on and do an assessment on their strengths, which is a lovely thing to do if your confidence is falling and people are feeling quite insecure about returning to work. To get back in touch with their strengths and be clear about what they do best can really help them come back into the workplace and be very adaptable, and just embrace that new world, really. And I think the other thing to remember as well is it doesn't always have to be you to do all the check-ins. Obviously there's a hierarchical responsibility between a line manager and employee, but sometimes people will share more and open up more with a colleague or a peer. So make sure you're thinking more widely about how those connections can actually take place. And the one thing we do know, Spider-Man reveals his true face there, is that we know about authenticity is that when people have time to build those meaningful relationships at work, we've got higher levels of trust, higher levels of engagement. And one of the things we found so wonderful about this virtual working and connecting with people in this way is we were all so formal in the past. We'd rock up in a room full of execs and talk about strategy. And now we're seeing the same exec with a cat on his head and kids running around while he's trying to talk serious stuff at work. And it just makes everybody appear so wonderfully human, which is a lovely thing. So just remember to involve people. There's lots of different ways you can do it, and you might find some of these a little bit cheesy, but obviously there's companies out there that have done a show and tell, which involves the kids. Let's face it, some of our kids just interfere in the meetings. They don't recognise which ones are important and which ones are not. So just involve them. So a company embraced this and just involve them in the meeting, which was great. There are other teams that are doing virtual yoga. They've got social time built in, so remember that the updates can be just go and grab a coffee, let's have 15 minutes just catching up on what's going on for you, rather than it always being about a work update. And team quizzes, as we've mentioned, but do so with caution. And one particular favourite of mine, which I do on every Zoom call, I won't do it on this one, but bring your dog to Zoom day, which is always one of my favourites. And the thing to remember with all of this is, just like when you're in the office, you need to bear in mind that you've got introverts and extroverts. There are differences and the diversity of preferences. So ensure that you individualise that contact according to the person that you're dealing with. So when you're in work, some people didn't want to socialise at work, and no, they don't want to do virtual bowling now. So it's really important to just remember, that person's not going to change just because they're now on the end of the screen. They are still that same person, and it's just something to respect and nurture that contact in a way that suits them. Ask them, what's the best way of staying in touch until you return? Because not everybody will want a weekly update. Some people might want it daily. So really individualise that contact. And then finally, this is where lots of us feel we've not really, for the first time, we can make plans. That's what I'm saying. We don't have to take that leap of faith. We're not going to have everything ticked and boxed, but we can make plans. It doesn't have to be that to step into the unknown. It's going to be really important for every employer to make sure their culture is inclusive, and that everyone returning is returning to a supportive and a caring environment. The pandemic has had an unequal impact across the workforce in many ways, as different groups of employees and individuals will all have been affected in different ways, will have different circumstances, and HR professionals and business leaders, you've got a brilliant opportunity here to take a blank piece of paper and get creative in how you reshape what that future world of work is going to look like. We've all been talking about agile working for years. Our hand has been forced, and now we've got this amazing opportunity to really rethink how we get stuff done. And if you've made the right effort, when you're back in action, those people are going to be more loyal. They're going to have a renewed motivation, a renewed sense of purpose. And remember that it's going to be really messy and uncomfortable for everybody, but we're all in it together. And the key thing is just show that openness, compassion, and inclusion throughout, and you can't go far wrong. Just remember to be human.
It's really important you think about how to reset your culture. Now, I'm getting a bit fed up with the term new normal, and it's not about going back to the norm. It's thinking about, how are we working? What are some of the things that we can take with us that worked well for us? What are the things we might want to leave behind? But you might be familiar with the McKinsey 7S model, which we've got up there. But this is around thinking about how you can reset your culture, and changes to the current lockdown restriction are obviously affecting different businesses in different ways. Different sectors will be opening up sooner than others. And the lockdown restrictions are likely to still continue to fluctuate. It might be in the future that we have stricter measures imposed, potentially with very little notice. So there is still a lot of change going on at the moment. And thinking about that, what are the most important things that you can do when you are starting to bring people back from furlough, and furlough starting to end? So as well as the constant and effective communication, and there's been a couple of great tips shared on the chat group as well, as so do have a look at those. But your main task is to reset your culture. Don't sort of expect it to pick up again where it left off. If you're familiar with Tuckman's model of team building and team development, there are different stages that teams go through. So the first one is forming. There's also storming, norming, and performing. So you might have had, before of all this, teams that were really in that norming stage, really working well together and performing. But when people are going back, they might have to restart again in forming those new relationships. And people will have been through a lot while this pandemic has been going on. People might have known people that have been quite poorly with it. They might have partners that are necessarily not working again, and real changes within their working life, and also still having children at home, and lots of impact. And we talked at the start about that sort of emotional curve that people might be experiencing. So don't be surprised if you have to go back to that forming stage, and you'll need to approach it with care and attention. I was speaking to one HR director the other day, who was saying, I normally get a feel for what the culture's like in the organisation just by walking around and knowing what's going on. But because everyone's working from home or furloughed at the moment, I've no real idea of what that culture's like anymore. So this is where your managers, as Nikki said, play a real key role in reshaping and setting that culture and making sure that that's continuing while people are off. So do be aware of that. And to think about those higher levels of anxiety people might be feeling, you know, so the people might be genuinely concerned about catching the virus. You've still got people shielding as well that you need to think about. Other people might be concerned about proving themselves, you know, is my job still going to exist in the right way? So it's a real opportunity to start as you mean to go on, really, and think about how you might reset that culture. And Delve, as well as other organisations, we support different organisations to review all aspects of culture, really. And for us, we've had to move very much away. Our business has changed quite a lot, because obviously we used to deliver quite a lot of face-to-face programmes and work within organisations on projects. And now we've had to really embrace the digital and virtual learning culture, and it's been a massively steep learning curve being able to do that and completely change the way our business runs. And our staff are on furlough, as we've said, and we've had to quickly adapt and change while they've been on furlough. So potentially when they do come back, their roles could look very different from what they were like before. So for us, we found it really helpful to keep them involved, having those one-to-one catch-ups, letting them know where we're up to in terms of the business and the direction and some of the projects we're working on, but also being really honest that actually, you know, potentially we've not got as much work as we had previously. We're having to work in different ways, and roles might change. And they've really appreciated that honesty, to be able to have that conversation, and also involve them talking through what possible scenarios might look like for the future as well. So just to finish, really, and then we'll take any questions, but we just wanted to share our approach, and this is how we think about culture reset. And the first stage is the discover stage. So all about taking stock, and the first thing you'll need to do is get a sense of where people are. And I noticed that on the chat somebody mentioned they'd done like a return to work survey, which is brilliant, because that gives you that opportunity to find out what's really going on for people and how are they feeling about returning to work. So you can revisit your purpose and values at this point. You know, as we said, our purpose is very important to us, as are our values. So every decision that we make is based around that. And even though the nature of the work we're doing now has shifted slightly, it still very much aligns with our purpose of supporting organisations to thrive. And think about what's changed for your customers as well. You know, so as we said, you know, some of our customers work in the public sector, work in the NHS, and you know, some of those organisations aren't opening the doors to external people for at least 18 months, some of them. So we've had to really adapt to deliver leadership programmes, for example, in a completely different way. And you can do post check-ins. We've got an engagement and wellbeing survey that we use. We've just rolled it out to a group of primary schools, actually, a multi-academies trust, which, as you can imagine, they're really wanted to know how teachers are feeling at the moment, because education's just so up in the air. But we've got an engagement check-in survey that you can use. Some of you might have your own pulse checks, and you can do focus groups as well, just getting information from one-to-ones to get a bit of a feel for where people are at. And think about stop start keep's a really good activity that you can try with people and with teams as well, to get people to think about, you know, what were some of the things that perhaps we were doing before the pandemic that we might want to stop doing. So for example, you know, the amount of meetings that we're having that weren't adding value, is that something that we can stop doing now, because there might be a different way of working? Other things that you want to start doing, so actually, you know, we want to start thinking about how we have virtual working from home and being able to have virtual check-ins and one-to-ones. That might be something you want to start doing as a result of what's happened recently. And then what are some of the things that you want to keep? So, you know, if you've got a really great one-to-one approach or appraisal system or induction process, those are some of the things you want to keep. But it's a great opportunity just to reset and take stock of where you're at. And the second thing really is around design. So this is where you might want to consider some of the harder S's of the McKinsey 7S model. So it's not always going to be easy. It's going to include some, you know, there might be some key changes that you need to make around team structures, as Charlotte mentioned some of that at the beginning as well. But it's also about thinking, what about the leadership behaviours that you want to see? So there's a real need for people to feel psychologically safe at the moment and able to talk about their well-being and what matters to them, and feel safe that they can raise concerns. And if you've got managers perhaps who weren't doing that before, then it's going to be even harder now in terms of that remote working. But it's a real opportunity to start to to revisit what your leadership behaviours are and what you want to see people doing and how that might look differently working remotely. And also thinking about how you design those agile ways of working. And then the third area is around deliver. So this is about, we've talked about reorientation, and it doesn't need to be complex. Somebody mentioned, well, we're welcoming people back with chocolate orange, which is great because they're all individually wrapped, so a bit safer than doing a buffet. But it doesn't have to be complicated. It needs to be a welcome. So the example we shared earlier of the big red sign on someone's desk saying, "Do not use this desk," that's hardly a great way to welcome somebody back. So when you're thinking about that reorientation, it doesn't have to be anything too fancy. It's just welcome, making sure people are having that one-to-one. They know what to expect, they know what's changed, and they know how they're going to be kept safe at work. And having that real approach to well-being as well. What's important to people around their health and well-being? How can we look after that? Continual dialogue as well, as we've mentioned, is important. And thinking about virtual learning. If you've been an organisation where you offer a lot of learning and development opportunities face to face, there's a real opportunity to reduce costs, make it more accessible. And David Rock, I don't know if anybody went to the Festival of Work last week, the CIPD one, but David Rock did a session which is brilliant, all about learning. And actually, there's a lot of value in virtual learning in this way. It's a lot more flexible, and you can get your message across in shorter sessions. So it's worth considering that going forward. And we know that it's really hard to make plans at this stage, but the most important thing to remember above everything really, is to communicate, be authentic and be human, because we're all humans at the end of the day, and it's just making sure that we're showing that we genuinely we've got that genuine concern for people as employers. So any sort of questions, any comments, anything that anybody would like to share? I'm not sure if there's anything else that's come on the chat or the Q&A.
Yeah, does anyone... Oh. Sorry, my microphone just went a bit strange. We've had a little bit of chat, and does anyone have any questions on anything that's been discussed? Has anyone got any good practice that they think they want to share with us? Now's your opportunity to tell us what you're doing.
Shall I stop sharing? Shall I stop sharing the screen?
Oh yeah, you can.
Yes, because then we. Oh yes, and then we can. Right. Have I got a way of letting everyone go on the screen? Trying to see if I can allow all participants on it. It doesn't appear to be letting me.
Yeah, you might not be able to in webinar mode, but
no.
But yeah, I mean, I guess if people haven't got any immediate questions or comments or anything, then feel free to get in touch with us through Farleys, or you can get in touch via Twitter.
Yeah.
And I hope you found it useful. Really, we just wanted to give you a bit of an opportunity to think about what it means in terms of that human aspect as well as the legal aspect as well, because there's so many guidelines and policies and things out there that it's just not forgetting about the humans at the end of that process, really.
Yeah. Great. Yes, that's it. We've already had one offer of coffee and a cake, so
yeah. Well, one of the things that Nick and I do on a Friday is we have a virtual gym together at the end of the week. So that's what we'll be planning to do later. So thanks very much for sharing that. And yeah, you're definitely not alone, Sarah.
You're not alone, Sarah.
Yeah, I think last week was it last week that was meant to be one of the worst weeks? There was a lot of people saying that lockdown was really getting to them, and we're all on this kind of roller coaster. So it's nice to just have a chat and hear some ideas from like the more human side. It's a bit difficult as a lawyer. We're the little sort of legal robots in the background, but we are actually real people, and we do care and want people to make sure that things are done in the best way possible. So yeah, feel free to get in touch with us all, and hopefully we'll hear from everyone soon.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks very much. Lovely to meet everyone.
Thank you. I'll end it now. Okay, thank you everyone. Bye bye.